So one night, turned out to be Friday the 13th, they had amassed an NVA sapper company. Their mission was to come in and just blow up our guns and shoot up the place. I think our intelligence knew that they were coming. When they woke us up, they said, we've been hearing a lot of stuff out there. We had an infrared sniper scope. So I looked through this thing and there was this column of guys crawling, and the lead guy was almost inside our wire.
Curious Humanography is proud to partner with Utah Honor Flight, part of the National Honor Flight Network, giving veterans the trip of a lifetime to Washington, D.C. to visit memorials built in their honor. Each flight is free for veterans and made possible by generous donors. To learn more or support their mission, visit utahhonorflight.org and find your local Honor Flight hub at www.honorflight.org. Also, if you'd like to see more stories like this, please support us by subscribing to our channel, liking, commenting on the video, and sharing it with your friends. Your support helps us continue to bring stories that deserve to be heard. Thank you for watching, and now back to our show.
My name is Ed Carey. I'm a native Utahn, born in Ogden, raised in Chicago. My mother passed away when I was 3, and my dad's family was in Illinois, so that's where I grew up. I grew up during the Cold War. I saw the domino theory when Vietnam started. I thought, this is the time to go fight the communists and get a GI Bill and go to school. So I enlisted in the Marines in 1965. And after training, I joined up with the 2nd Battalion, 11th Marines, who were artillery, 105 howitzers. And we went over to Vietnam by ship. We were the very last of the 1st Marine Division as initial troops to deploy to Vietnam. So we got there and we set up a fire base near the hill that was occupied by the 5th Marines. The 5th Marines were the infantry, the grunts. Those were the real Marines,
Hardcore.
We slept on cots and lived in tents, and we had it pretty easy. Those guys were for real, but we supported them. My job, I was in the Fire Direction and Control Center. I worked with a pencil. We calculated all the data, the range, the direction, the fuses, all the data that went on into a fire mission for the artillery. And we did it with a pencil. Nowadays, it's all GPS. It's all, computers, and but we just had a slide rule and a.
And was it real time? Were you right by those guys that they were firing?
Yeah.
So they would give you data, and you would.
Well, the forward observer, he would call in. We would have his approximate location on a big grid map.
Okay.
So we put a pin on him, and then we had a pin on our battery center. And we had a giant, what do you call it? What do you use to measure angles? Anyway, we would measure the distance to him and figure out his range. And then he would tell us where he was looking. So we would put a little grid on his pin in the direction he was looking. And he said 500 yards. So we'd drop usually 1 or 2 rounds on where we thought the enemy was. And he would say, drop 200, left 300. So we'd move the pin on his grid and then calculate again the data, and then would try to create a bracket. And once we created a bracket, we knew where the middle was, and then we would fire for effect 6 rounds, or 6 guns, 2 rounds, 3 rounds.
Wow.
A 105 shell would in the airburst would impact everybody within a 50-yard radius.
Wow.
So it was a pretty effective weapon. The Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army didn't like us. So they would try to come and get us. The first time they tried it, they hit us on the other side of the battalion fire base, which is about the size of maybe a college football stadium. We had 3 artillery batteries, 105s, one 106 Mortar Battery, which was support, and then a headquarters battery or a headquarters unit. So it's a big area, and they hit us on the other side. So I wasn't involved in that at all, except I went over to help clean up.
Was that during the day or night that they did
Night.
that?
Oh, it was at night. And I helped pick up a stretcher, carried a dead Marine back to and that was very sobering.
How long had you been there when that happened?
A month, maybe.
Oh, wow.
So we were just there. We hadn't had all of our perimeter defenses up. We didn't have all our bunkers in the right place.
Was it kind of in a jungle area, or was it somewhere else?
No, it was in a flat plain. The coastal plain, really. We're about 10 miles in from the coast.
Did you feel like, had you just taken it for granted that it was semi-safe because it hadn't bothered you, or were you always on edge there before that happened?
We never thought we were semi-safe, but we were always confident. I was never. I don't think I was ever afraid in Vietnam, because I always knew the guy next to me would take care of me, and I would take care of him, and it was an illusion, maybe. You know, we weren't immortal, but we thought we were. Anyway.
And how far would you shoot? How far would the artillery go? How far are you shooting?
The max range is about 5 miles, so it wasn't that far. And when the 5th Marines would move out into a sweep or an operation beyond our range, we would send out 4 105s with them, and we would go out to do the calculations for the fire missions. So we would go out forward sometimes, but not very often. Mostly we stayed in that fire base.
How, from the time you got feedback to you giving the new information, how long is that? You know, back then when you were calculating by hand, is that?
Less than a minute.
Wow.
We're pretty fast. Because once the artillery rounds started falling around the enemy, they knew they had to either dig in or get out.
Yeah.
So we had to be pretty quick.
And they were airbursts, so it would explode in the air, so it
They
covered
were,
more territory?
Yeah. They were timed fuses. We would calculate the time of travel. We would calculate the time when they were 20 meters above the deck, and then they would go off. That was part of our job.
Wow, what's the mechanism in there to the timer inside
It's a time fuse. They just set the time,
Wow.
time of flight. And then they also had what they called radar fuses, so that they would know when they were 20 meters above the deck. Because it wasn't always the same height. If we were firing into the mountains, those mountains were higher than we were.
Right.
And unless we knew the difference in elevation, which we didn't, then we were just guessing. And then a quick fuse would just go off in the ground. But we didn't use those unless we had a hard target, which was very seldom we used those. Anyway, so that was our life. We would, eventually the Seabees came in and plowed up, because we were in a sandy plain. They plowed up hills, and we built our bunkers on these little hills. They were about 4 feet high. They weren't really high, but they gave us height. And if you weren't on watch, every night you'd go out on the bunkers. And they'd send out 4 guys, and 1 crew-served weapon, usually an M60 or a 50 cal. And we would go out there and set that up, and our watches would start at 10 o'clock. And the first 2 guys would watch till midnight, and then they'd go to sleep, and the second 2 guys would watch from midnight to 2 and go to sleep, and then the first guys would watch from 2 to 4, and then the second guys would watch from 4 to 6, would secure the bunker and go back to work. So we got 4 hours of sleep a night in 2-hour increments, if we were lucky. We were young. We could do that.
How often were you on watch?
Almost every night,
Wow.
unless we were on watching the fire control center.
Wow.
And then during the day, we built bunkers. We laid barbed wire. We had a patrol around the fire base, but it wasn't a combat patrol. We just walked around looking for booby traps, or sometimes we would find aiming stakes, because they would they would snipe at us sometimes when they didn't attack us very often, but they would snipe at us and they'd drop mortars on us sometimes. And so we would look for that on our little patrol around the compound.
So you had tents and cots there on that compound.
Oh yeah, we were
Food was pretty good?
high on the hog.
Yeah.
We had GP tents, 16 by 32, I think, and cots, and because it was artillery, we had all sorts of, we had ammo boxes. We could make those into furniture, nightstands. I have a picture of a little tiny Christmas tree on my nightstand one time. But you were there for a year, so it was like that's your home for a year.
So you were based there on that base the whole time,
Yeah.
pretty much. Did it
Right.
move much, or it just stayed?
No, we stayed put. And the idea was the 5th Marines were pacifying the whole area. They would go into the villages. They would take the corpsmen with them and set up aid stations. They would cook rice. They wouldn't give them raw rice. They'd give them cooked rice because they had to eat that right away. They couldn't pack it off and give it to the VC or the. So they made friends with the villages to the extent they could, and it was a pretty quiet area. But eventually, they wanted to get at us because we were hurting them. We fired what they call H&Is, harassment interdiction, all night long. So we knew where gathering places were, we knew where trail intersections were, we knew where they might be, and we already had the data calculated for those spots. So we'd fire all night long at those places. We just never let them rest. So one night turned out to be Friday the 13th, January 67. They had amassed. They had to come in 2 or 3 at a time because the 5th Marines would see them if there was a big group. But they amassed a NVA sapper company. And their mission was to come in and just blow up our guns and shoot up the place. And I think our intelligence knew that they were coming because on that night we had what they call SID, seismic intrusion device, which was little seismographs that on wires we put out in front of our bunkers. And then we had headphones, and we could dial 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, listen to each sending unit. We could hear any movement out there.
Just walking.
Just walking.
Wow.
And so the midnight to 2 couple guys, when they woke us up, they said, we've been hearing a lot of stuff out there. I thought, that's probably the farmers stealing our barbed wire because, that was golden to the farmers. So we took our position and we listened. There was a lot of noise going on. So we had a sniper scope, which is an infrared sniper scope. But it wasn't mounted on a weapon. It was just handheld. And the batteries were pitiful, so we didn't use it unless we really wanted to see something.
Yeah.
So I looked through this thing, and there's a column of guys coming on, crawling through the wire, and the lead guy was almost inside our wire. So I called into the command post, and I said, we got an enemy in the wire. Well, if you're in a bunker at night, every night, all night, in the dark, you see what you're afraid of seeing. So there was always guys calling in, we had enemy in the wire. And they said, we'll put up a pop flare, illumination flare, a small one. And then the enemy turned into a bush or a log, so it was never really the enemy. These guys were real. And so we had permission to fire. Fire control, accidental discharges were dangerous over there. And so we had weapons, they were loaded, but there was no round in the chamber. So we were locked. We weren't locked. We were loaded and unlocked. And the next bunker over that was manned, the bunker that they were looking for was unmanned because that battery was out. They were on a forward mission. And they knew that bunker was empty. And if they get into that bunker, then that's their position to defend and hold us down. And
How far apart were the bunkers?
probably about 50 yards.
Okay.
And
And
so,
how many people were on the base where you at? How many people were in that camp where you were?
oh, I don't know, 500.
Oh, a
maybe.
lot.
I don't really know.
Yeah.
So they put up a pop flare, and it was dark enough, you couldn't use your sights. I would just look down the muzzle, and I fired once, and it kicked up the sand. This guy was on all fours, kneeling. Kicked up the sand underneath him, so I raised the muzzle, and I shot him. And then I swung to the next guy behind him, and I shot him. And I swung to the next guy behind him, and I shot him. And then it happened. The boom of the rifle, I couldn't hear. The only thing I heard was the mechanical bolt coming back, and I thought that was strange. And then the next thing I knew, I was squeezing the trigger on an empty M14. So I don't remember what happened after that third guy. But I was in charge of the bunker, so I put another magazine in my weapon, and I positioned the guys around the bunker. We had one guy on an M60 machine gun. And the enemy was really good at getting out of there. So there'd be a skirmish, a fight, and in the dark, and then in the morning we'd go out and there'd be nothing there. They would leave with their wounded, they'd leave with their dead, and we weren't going to let that happen. So now those the mortars, the big mortars, I forgot their caliber now. Anyway, started putting up their illumination, and their illumination was big, and it lit up the place like daytime. And so we started suppressing fire on everything that was possible to hide behind. All the bushes, all the berms, we just kept up a continuous fire until daylight. And daylight came, and they brought out a Vietnamese officer who shouted out there, you know, like they talk funny, you know. And about a dozen guys stood up and surrendered with their hands up. And they brought them in, and there was another dozen or so that were dead out there. So it was a successful defense of the battalion. And you know, we had some awards. I got an attaboy, and I went home.
Was that a blur? Once it started, it was just in your mind?
It was clear until it went black. And I looking back on it, what happened was the good little Christian boy who knows God loves all his children, that was drilled into me deep and strong. The Marine training, this is how you do it, that was drilled into me deep and strong. And they conflicted in somewhere in my soul. And it was like people in trauma have the same experience. You know, a car crash happens and they don't remember what happened. Football players get their lights knocked out and they don't remember what the rest of the game. It's common with trauma. It was uncommon with me. I never had it before, but
Right.
so I went home and I got news that a buddy of mine, a high school buddy of mine, was drafted and killed over there. So I went to give comfort to his mother. You know, I was full of myself. I was just, you know, I was going to help her out. And I went into the room where she was, and I was confronted by the authentic grief of a mother who lost her son. And it was awful. And in a heartbeat, I knew I did that to mothers in Vietnam. And I thought, oh, crap. You know, what have we done?
How long were you home when that happened?
I was on leave. I was,
Oh, wow.
so I walked back home. It wasn't very far. And by this time, there were Marines, there were Vietnam veterans protesting And they were all hippies. They had long hair. They were, we didn't like those guys. And I was not going to be one of those guys.
Yeah.
And so I just shoved it back into my back of my soul, and I said, I am not going to do this. And I found out that was typical. So when I worked with the VA and the PTSD guys, who were all just about my age, they all had a similar experience. They weren't going to deal with it until later, and it happens. In my experience, we had a son who was just driving my wife and I crazy. And when I say crazy, I mean emotionally distraught to the point where my PTSD came bubbling up and I had flashbacks and I was like, what the hell is going on, Because I wasn't going to do this. And all of a sudden I was doing it. But because my son was a little asshole, we had him in a rehab program, and they were also counseling parents. So I had some help, with what to do with this PTSD. And so I knew what to do, and it's essentially when trauma happens, we don't respond to it in a human way. I call it John Wayne. John Wayne gets punched in the nose, and he said, that didn't hurt. The hell it didn't, but you deny it. So when you're a soldier, you're not going to, cry for the guys you just killed. You can't do that. So you suppress that, and later on it comes out. So what you have to do is you have to go back up and conjure that up. And I have a great trail east of Ogden. It climbs 2,000 feet up the mountainside. And in the late 90s, there's almost nobody up there. So I'd go up there and I'd kind of remember some of that stuff. And then I'd start yelling. And no, I don't accept this. And I would just scream and I would cry. And if you saw me up there, you'd think I was crazy. But eventually, that just purges. You deal with it in an appropriate way. You reflect your humanity and your dignity and your value against the trauma. And you say, no, I'm better than that. I don't deserve this. I don't accept this. And eventually, you don't have to anymore. You've put out the fire that was in your soul, and so it's okay all of a sudden.
So for you, you've kind of purged that out.
Yeah, it'll never be completely gone. You get triggered once in a while, but
Right.
It doesn't bother me anymore. So I ended up working with the VA in the outpatient mental health area with other PTSD veterans, which is the best thing you can do. I had a great time, and that ended with COVID because they closed down the volunteer program that I was working on, and so now I hang out with some veterans on occasion, and I try to put that behind me.
When you were working with the vets, especially the VA, were you giving them that advice of what you did, or how did that work?
As a peer specialist, I'm not a therapist, and I don't tell them what to do.
Yeah.
I tell them what I did. And so we share our stories, we share our experiences. And that just, when you're alone dealing with this thing by yourself, it's hard. But when you can share it with other guys and they have the same thing, then it validates what you're going through, and it takes the edge off it, and it just makes all the difference in the world. So that's what we did.
How did your wife deal with all this?
She wasn't we weren't married when I was in the military. And when we were first married, she told me I was yelling in my sleep about Vietnam. And I said, no, I don't do that. And I never did again. But you can't completely hide all of your wounds. So when I got involved with the VA, actually when I got involved with dealing with my own PTSD, she was very supportive, and she's always been supportive. And I mentioned I wanted to share this with my kids so they would know, first of all, that they were raised by a PTSD guy, and that may affect them, it may not, but they should know about it because they're going to raise their kids, and I want them to be healthy and happy, and they are.
So tell me about that. You can bring that up and talk
So
about that.
in our one of our groups when we were working with the vets, the issue came up. Your kids should know, your family should know that it's not their fault that you're angry all the time, or it's not their fault that you get moody or whatever. You should explain to them. And I thought, well, I should take my own advice, and I wrote up a story starting with being born in Utah and moved to Illinois and going to save the Vietnamese people from the communists. And it turned out to be 6 pages of my story for the kids. And I sent that to all of them. I wanted all of them to have it. My daughter in Chicago thought, oh no, this is Dad's swan song. Dad's going to take his life. I said, no, I just, this is important to me, and I want you guys to know about it. So she was okay then. Yeah, no, I think people should know how bad war is to the people that we send to fight it. We think they're heroes, they're victims, and we victimize them. And I swear, the richest nation in the world, we could bribe our enemies. We could buy them off. We could do a lot better things than send our kids to war. And we need to learn how to not do that. But the people who send our kids to war, they don't go to war. They haven't gone to war. Their kids don't go to war. We need to address that in this country. We need to do better. We deserve better.
When you finished writing that, did it feel like a purge in your mind? What was your takeaway after you wrote that? I'm curious what you...
Yeah, no, I was glad I did it. I was glad I got it all out and sorted out. Because in your mind, these things go around in circles, but to lay it all out in black and white, carefully, thoughtfully, then that's an accomplishment. Then you feel like, okay, I got a handle on this, and I can share it with my kids, and I can be okay with it, and I hope they're okay with it, and they are.
So you were on R&R. How far into your year over there were you on R&R?
Well, I did 2 tours.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
So
I was going to save those people,
So what? Okay, you went over and you joined in 65, 66?
I was in 65. I was over there in 66 and 67.
So you did 2 terms over there?
Yeah.
Always on the same base, or did you move the second time?
Well, when you volunteered for another tour, they give you 30 days free leave.
Okay.
So I went home.
Is that when you went to the grieving mom?
No, that was later when I was on leave. But I went home.
What was that like, going home?
It was great. You know what? It was a kid who, by this time, the incident with the sappers had happened. I just wanted to be home, and on that visit home, I was driving home from a visit with my brother and his family, and it was a rainy night. There was a car going slow in front of me, and I pulled out to pass him, and I saw 2 little things going up and down on the road in front of me. It was at night. It was dark. And then the guy who was running turned around to face me. I saw his face, and bam, I hit him. And then I thought he was okay. We stopped. The police came. They took him away in an ambulance. He seemed like he was fine. He had 1 little cut, but he had internal bleeding, and he died in the hospital.
Oh my gosh!
And so,
So hold on. He was running him on the side of the road or something?
he was running in the lane.
In the lane. Oh, my gosh.
So I called the district attorney and I said, I can extend my leave. I can stay if you need me to stay. He said, no, we have the reports and everything. You can go on back. So I went on back, and I flew into Da Nang, and I got a hop down to Chulai, which is where we were. And when I got there, I noticed everybody was wearing helmets and flak jackets. And when I left, they weren't. And I said, what's going on? And they said, we're getting hit, So like I said, we were about 10 miles out, and I was in khakis. I had a sea bag, no weapon. And I walked out on the highway, put my thumb out, and got a ride up to where our fire base was. And it was about 1,000 meters off the highway. So I got off and I started walking in, and it didn't look right. And I got in there, and it was an Army fire base now. And they moved my unit up by Da Nang. So I said, well, the heck with this. I'm not staying by you Army guys. So I went back to the highway, and it was getting dark. And I still didn't have any weapon. But I got a ride up, and I found my unit. So they had relocated, and the fighting was getting more intense in the northern area, and so they wanted us up there.
Is that artillery, snipers, both,
well, it was
all of the above, or what?
It was the infantry was active, and we were supportive. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I did. We moved once, but I didn't move. They moved, and I just went along for the ride.
And what made you sign up the second time?
I still believe that we were doing the right thing.
Yeah.
You have to believe you're doing the right. Well, if you're volunteering, you better believe you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And I did, and it wasn't. I was wrong. The South Vietnamese army government was corrupt, and it didn't represent the people. And eventually I could see that. I could see the Army kind of being bullies on their own people, and the police, treating them roughly. And I thought, whoa, this doesn't look right. And it wasn't.
What happened in your second run there?
Nothing special.
It was the same.
It was the same.
Were you firing artillery every day?
Yeah.
Every day?
Every day. Every night.
Every night?
Yeah.
Mostly at night?
Yeah, mostly at night. During the day, we would get if there was any action out there, if they were engaged with somebody, then we would get a day mission. Or if one of the patrols were hiding in the bushes and they could see where a group of NVA or VAC were, they would call in a mission. Sometimes they'd be whispering, fire mission. Battery adjust, and so you knew they were very close when they were doing that.
Did they try and overrun you guys again when you were the second time you were there? That was it?
No, but I left just before the second Tet offensive. And the guys, so when you come back, you were assigned on the Westpac, the western part. You were assigned, then we went to Camp Lejeune on the East Coast. And eventually guys who rotated back, we hooked up together and we were telling stories, some of them true. And that Tet offensive, they were hit. And one guy talked about melting down the barrel of the M60. He just kept continually firing. Because you couldn't fire an automatic weapon full out all the time. You had to,
right,
a burst of five. But they got into it after I left, which was okay with me,
And your second tour there, is that when you kind of started changing your thinking, or was it after you got home?
I didn't want to change my thinking. I wanted to think I was doing the right thing, but I could see this wasn't right. Things weren't the way they were supposed to be, if we were the good guys, helping the good guys, fighting the bad guys. It's not that simple.
Yeah.
We want to make it that simple. It's not that simple.
The camaraderie, friends you had in the base, what was that like?
Well, they were your best buddies ever. I can't remember their names. When you're in that environment, the ethic is, I'll take care of the guy next to me, he'll take care of me. We were all totally committed to each other. And I had one good friend who I kept in touch with afterwards, and eventually he passed away. So when I ran into one guy, we lived in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I worked for American Motors. You remember American Motors?
Yeah.
They're gone. But I ran into a guy who was working in the same general area, and he was telling he was making up war stories. And I said, Capuch, his name was, what are you doing? And he said, oh, yeah, they want to hear this stuff, so. I said, no, they don't want to hear it, but that's. So when you hear a guy telling war stories, take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
He's probably BSing you.
The artillery guns, which were they howitzers or what
Howitzers,
were they?
yeah.
Were they on track or were they? Did they have
No,
tracks? No,
they were towed. They were
and
towed.
were they pretty reliable?
No.
Talk to me about. They weren't. Tell me
Well,
about those.
The accuracy of a howitzer is less than the accuracy of a gun. So we had 8-inch guns, and they were bigger. They were more accurate and more powerful. But the howitzers were they were the bread and butter of warfare. They were the same 105 howitzers they used in World War II. And they would use them till they wore out the barrel and put a new barrel on them and use them again. So they were effective. They weren't the best. And we also had a contingent in our battalion that was naval gunfire. So they were part of the Navy. And they directed gunfire from the Navy ships that were offshore. And those guys, they were serious. They put some iron on the enemy. But no, the 105s were very useful. They were the core of, and they were designed to shoot at the enemy in front of you. So there was probably, I'm not sure, a 40-degree sweep where they could aim them. And there was an aiming stake here and there was an aiming stake there. But then they put an aiming stake over here because we were firing 360. The enemy was all around us.
Wow.
So you had to be really careful that they were using the right set of aiming stakes. Because if they weren't, they could lob a shell into our guys.
Did that happen occasionally?
I'm sure it did. I'm sure it did. But I'm not aware of it. But we were always careful. We were always worried about that.
How often were you getting hit with with them lobbing mortars in? Did they do that very much?
Yeah, I couldn't say. It was just a nuisance.
Yeah.
We didn't.
You weren't scared of it necessarily.
No, they couldn't scare us. We were immortal. Until we weren't, but.
Talk about, you said, so F-4s, you saw them flying over, the Navy guys. Would you call them in, or what was that story?
No, we didn't call them in. Probably the infantry guys called them in. But when we were forward on missions where we were beyond our normal range, we were always glad to see them because we knew they were.
When you went outside, when you were doing those forward, were you camping at that point?
Yeah. We were.
How long would you be out there usually?
As long as it lasted a week, maybe.
Yeah.
It depended. I don't remember.
Did you enjoy that more than the base because it was something new, or was it?
Yeah, it was different. We were in a very predictable routine. We worked all day, we watched all night. War is boring for the most part. It was just, and there's always work to do. There's always chores. My favorite one was to burn the shitters.
Did explain that.
So we had 2 latrines, and they were little shacks, and they had toilet-looking seats inside of them. And outside, there were 55-gallon drums that were cut off, and they were under the holes in the toilet seats. So every day, you had to drag those out, put some kerosene in there, and burn them. It wasn't very dignified, but you could spend all morning out there burning the shitters and read a book and relax. And
Did it smell
you were
awful?
upwind. Yeah, you didn't want to.
How was the food?
Well, we had what they call A-rations. We had a mess hall, so the food was pretty good. They baked bread there somewhere. I don't know if it was back in Chulai at a Central Bakery or these guys baked them in the mess hall, but they sliced it so thin it was insulting. And so
was it good though?
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
We thought it had sesame seeds in it, but the sesame seeds had legs. Well, we didn't care. They were baked. But one guy requested masks. So in the Navy, because the Marine Corps is a Navy service, you could request masks and stand before the mast with the commander and complain. So we had a newspaper that was, what was it called? I can't think of it now.
The Stars and Stripes, or
Yeah, Stars and Stripes.
Okay.
So he brought a Stars and Stripes in, and he read it through the piece of bread. It was so thin, you could see through it. So we got thicker slices after that. But the food was pretty good. When we were deployed, we were in C-Rations, and they were okay. We didn't, they were, some were better, some were worse. When they opened up a case, they would open it upside down, so you couldn't see what you were picking.
Oh, was it just a lottery kind of thing?
Yeah, because some guys would go for, the best ones, and then nobody else could get the best ones. So.
What was your favorite sea ration?
I liked, they had ham sliced, and that came with they were all in round cans, so little round cans of bread. You could make sandwiches. The favorite dessert was pecan cake roll, but that came with ham and limas, and I didn't like ham and limas. We called them ham and mothers,
Would you heat it up, most of them, or no? Or was that an option?
It was an option. It was kind of hard to do, but sometimes stateside, when we go out on bivouac for training, we'd have fires. Because there's always stuff to burn. There's tubes, there's boxes, and then...
you probably don't want to cook your food over the shitter, though.
No. So you could heat them up, and they were better heated up.
They were?
Yeah.
Yeah. Were they okay?
Yeah, they were okay. I never... some were better, some were worse. Some I didn't bother eating. I didn't eat ham and limas.
Where did you go on R&R? Did you go any place good?
I went to Japan on the first R. I had 2 R&Rs.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Japan.
Where did you go in Japan?
Oh,
All over?
They talk funny.
Yeah. Was that enjoyable?
Yeah, it was. It was. They put you up in a nice hotel, and you had some money to spend. You went to the bars, and I think my second R&R was to Hong Kong, and that was really cool because the Brits were still running Hong Kong then.
Yeah.
And I remember I went into a store, a bookstore, a British bookstore, and I bought a book on Vietnam. And that was an eye-opener because that was written from, I don't know whose perspective. Historically, it was accurate. It wasn't,
It wasn't propaganda.
It wasn't propaganda. And I saw a movie. what movie was it? I don't know, but it was like wonderful. You're back in the world. You're watching the movie. Life was great, and then the power went out. And I said, "Oh crap!" You know what? But then the power came on. We watched the movie.
Was it hard going back after R&R? Or no? Did it just seem like it was okay?
No, you had the sense of you need to be with your buddies. You need to be there. And now I think it's typical certainly in wartime. You know, guys cheat. You know, they get wounded and then they cheat to get back to with their buddies. Cause
is that kind of how you felt the 30 days you were home in between tours? That you felt like you needed to get back, or was that different?
No, that was different. I was just happy to be home. And then when I went back, see, we went over with the original unit. We went together. We learned together. We made mistakes together. We were pretty much a tight group. But those guys didn't extend. They didn't come back for a second tour.
Did they think you were crazy for extending?
No.
Or not really?
If they did, they kept it to themselves because I had a gun, you know. No. The second tour was different because they were different guys. And some of them I trusted, some of them I didn't trust. You know, it was
a different experience for you.
Yeah, it was a different experience. But there was no intense combat on the second tour. We did our job. We manned our bunkers. We got harassed, but there was nothing significant.
When you came home, what, in 1967 then?
Yeah.
And that's kind of a lot of anti-war activists going on. Where did you fly into? Did you fly into San Diego, or did you take a boat back?
No, we flew back. We flew back and forth because I.
Oh yeah, and what was that? Did you meet any of that
no,
anti-war stuff?
I think we flew into Sacramento, the air base in Sacramento. No, I didn't have any anti-Vietnam, anti-war experience. Although when I enlisted, my sister, she established the Mothers for Peace in Vietnam group in Chicago. She was protesting the war when I was enlisting. So I knew there was a lot of...
what did you think of that at the time when you heard that about her? Was that like...
I thought she was wrong, but I thought she was doing what she thought was right.
Okay.
So and she felt the same way about me. We respected each other. You know, I wish we could do that now in this country.
Yeah, that's gone, isn't it?
Yeah, it's too bad.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, when I got out, I went to college, and sometimes people would say, you know, because I was older than they were, you know. Hey, where you been, Ed? And I said, well, I was in the Marines, and what time is nice day today? And so they would just change the subject. Nobody gave me a hard time. It was like you were invisible. Yeah. Which was okay with me, you know, but.
Where did you go to work after? So you went to American Motors?
I went to
how long did you work there?
Well, I went to school at a branch campus of the University of Wisconsin in Kenosha, Parkside.
Yeah.
The name of it. And met a girl. You know, we got married, and her dad worked for American Motors. She was a supervisor, and he got me an interview. And they were looking for college grads, you know, business degree kids, which was stupid because American Motors was as much a combat zone as Vietnam was. The company hated the union hated the company. They were just always at each other. It was crazy. I said, I thought we were here to build cars. But I was working on the Gremlin for a while.
The Gremlin.
Then they moved the Gremlin production up to the Milwaukee plant, and we started building the Pacer. Yeah. And we built the Pacer for a while, but then we doubled up on supervisors, and I was low man on the totem pole. So I ended up in the accounting department. in a white-collar job. And then I ended up in the planning department, which was kind of a materials planner. And by this time, I told my wife that we want to go to Utah. We want to get back. I want to go to live in Utah. And I kept it up until she said, you go to Utah, find a job, we move out there, or never mention it again. I said, yes, dear. So in 78, I came out here. My dad had remarried a gal he knew in Salt Lake. So they lived in Salt Lake, and I lived with them. But I had a 4-year degree from an outside college,
What was your degree in?
business.
Yeah, just straight
and
business.
Second in communication, but I had manufacturing experience. I had 4 years in the Marine Corps. I had a good resume, and I had about 5 jobs lined up. But the best one was a truck plant in Ogden, White Motors. They built trucks in Ogden.
Wow, semi-trucks?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, over the road, big.
Wow.
And it was similar to what I was doing for American Motors, and so I took that job as a buyer there. And then they went bankrupt, and I got a job on Hill. But the job I got on Hill didn't pay very much, and all 5 kids, they still wanted to eat, So I looked around for income, and the Air Force Reserve was right there. And when in the Marines, we didn't like the Air Force.
Why is that?
Well, we didn't like anybody. They had it so easy. But it turned out to be a great experience. I stayed until I turned 60. They kick you out when you're 60.
What did you do for them?
I was a first sergeant in the maintenance squadron. They think ex-Marines walk on water, so it worked out well.
What planes did you work on?
We had F-16s.
I bet that was cool.
It was
Yeah.
cool. I got a ride in the back seat of one.
Oh, what was that like?
Oh, that was awesome. It was awesome. And I didn't throw up.
Is that pretty common for people to throw up in that?
Yes, it is. and the pilot could have done that to me, but he was a nice guy. No, that was a good experience. The Air Force Reserve, those guys were very good at what they did. They were very competent. The Marines would say, achieve the objective and then the welfare of the troops. And the Air Force would say, you take care of your people, they'll take care of the objective. I said, oh, that's nice. So I got that, and then because I did a full 20 or more, now we have Medicare and TRICARE. So my wife had open heart surgery in Chicago on vacation.
Wow.
And, that bill was hundreds of thousands of dollars. We didn't cost a nickel.
Wow.
So I have got universal health care. I didn't mean to. I didn't intend to. I just fell into all of this stuff. I think the good Lord was looking out for me because I wasn't that smart. But now I've got a good retirement and good health care. I got 10 grandkids. Most of them are here in Utah. One of my granddaughters just got engaged, so pretty soon.
Grandkids are awesome, aren't they?
They're the reward for putting up with them.
That is true.
Yeah. No, it was great.
Back me up a little bit. You before we started recording, you told me the story of how you ended up in the Marines. Somebody gave you some advice. Can you give me that story again?
Yeah, no. I knew the domino theory that said the communists were going to take over the world one country at a time. And that played out in Korea. But we fought them in Korea, and we ended up in the stalemate, but we didn't lose Korea. In Vietnam, Vietnam was occupied by the Japanese during World War II, and they treated the Vietnamese badly. But prior to that, it was a French colony. So after the World War II was over, the French came back, And the Vietnamese were saying, hey, no, we're okay on our own. And the French said, no, we'll take care of you. And so they fought the French, and they beat them. And but we were the allies of the French, so for some reason we thought, well, we'll come in and take care of things. And
I think it was, didn't they want France to join NATO? I think that's why we were involved in that.
French was in NATO for a while, yeah.
But I think this is our,
Maybe.
we were willing to take this over if France would.
I wasn't aware of that.
I think that's what the deal was.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So anyway, Eisenhower knew it was a mistake. And every president since then knew it was a mistake. If you ever get a chance to watch the PBS series on Vietnam, it's very disturbing, but it's very good too. They all knew it was a mistake. And if Ho Chi Minh, who was the figurehead for the North Vietnam, he wasn't really running the show, but he was.
You mean Vietnamese, North Vietnamese?
North Vietnamese,
yeah.
Right. He thought himself as like Abraham Lincoln, uniting his country. He thought he would get support from America. We weren't smart enough to give him support. Anyway, so the war started up, and I was working. I was out of high school, working for a manufacturing company, making $70 a week, putting $50 in the bank for college, giving $10 to the old man, and living on $10 a week. It was okay, but the cost of college was going up faster than my savings account, and I thought, well, those South Vietnamese, they need my help, so I'm gonna enlist in the military and get my GI Bill and go to school. And my whole family was against it. They thought this was foolish. And at that time, people were trying to do anything they could to get out of the draft, including, like I said, faking bone spurs, But they did all sorts of things. They would, or move to Canada. A lot of them moved to Canada or Mexico. And they said, Ed, don't do this. And I said, no, I think I should. And my brother-in-law said, well, if you go with the ones who are going to bring you back alive. So go with the Marine Corps. So I said, oh, okay. It wasn't.
Did you know what he meant by that?
Yeah, no? I knew what he meant by that.
And what did he mean by that? When
he meant those guys would take care of me. And he wasn't that sure about the Army guys. So, so I enlisted in the Marine Corps, and it was.
And tell me about basic training.
Oh, it was a big mistake. I wish. How can I get out of here?
Yeah, what was it like?
Well, it was intense. It was hard. They were always yelling at you. You never were good enough. You never were fast enough. They were always pushing. And then you were invested in the training so that if somebody else was slacking off, you would get after them as well. So we had this camaraderie, and by the time it was over, you knew that you were just God's gift to the world. You were the baddest person around, and they called us for if people want to volunteer to give blood. So I said, sure, I'll give blood. So we went to the Navy hospital, and they took us on a bus, and they dropped us off, and we walked along sidewalk into the hospital, and people were separating as we walked through them, It was like, oh yeah, they know, we're bad. And then, you carried that. I carried that through 4 years. Well, for 3.5 years. At the end, but when I went back to the East Coast, I got what they call a med cruise. They keep a battalion of Marines in the Mediterranean at all times. So I took another ship across the Atlantic. I crossed both oceans on Navy ships as cargo, deep in the hole. But I did that. That was great. And I came back, and then I just wanted to get out. And the training level never backed off. We were always training hard. And I was just tired of it, you know. And I was glad that I didn't do something stupid and get in trouble because I just wanted to go home.
When you came home after the second tour, did life feel super pedestrian because of what you were doing over there? I mean, I feel like that's a common theme for a lot of vets, that they come home and it, you know, people are trivializing traffic or whatever versus what it felt like in the war. Was that a thing for you?
No, I never felt that way. When I got out, my dad had remarried this gal he knew in Salt Lake, and they lived in Downers Grove, Illinois, where I grew up. That's a Chicago suburb, until my dad retired. Then they moved to Salt Lake. So when I got out, there was my home wasn't there anymore. I had a brother who lived on a lake in southern Wisconsin with 7 kids. And his name was Jack. And I said, Jack, I'm going to live with you, okay? He said, okay. So we built a couple of extra bedrooms in the basement of this house. And his older son had one, I had the other one. And I had to establish residence in Wisconsin to get in-state tuition. So I had a year in this Camelot. I mean, it was fun. The kids, my nephews and nieces, were just full of life, and we was on a lake, and we had a boat. We water skied. In the wintertime, I don't know what we did in the wintertime. We shoveled snow. But it was. I think it was very important for me. I didn't know it. It was just very good living. And then I started school, and I was still living with my brother until I got engaged and married this gal, and then we moved into Kenosha, where she lived, where American Motors was, where her dad had a job there, and that's where I got my job at American Motors.
Go back, the boat. I'm surprised they shipped you over by boat. What was that like? How long was that trip, and what was it like on the boat?
Well, first of all, we went down to, we were the last of the 1st Marine Division, so everybody's stuff that they didn't want to take with them, we took. So we were stevedores for about a week down in San Diego loading ships. And it was a big old ship.
Was it a convoy of ships that went over?
No, it was
just you guys.
Just us.
What was the name of the boat? Do you remember?
No.
Okay.
I don't. But we went to Hawaii, and we got off. So I had a couple of days in Hawaii. That was really cool. And then we got on a different ship, and we went to Okinawa, and we got off. And we did some jungle training in Okinawa. I found out how easy it is to hide right next to somebody who doesn't know you're there. You know, and we weren't that good at it. But I thought, oh, this is scary. We're going to a jungle.
Was the boat cramped when you were on it, or was the sleeping quarters?
The first one wasn't, 'cause it was just a big old boat. The second one was a little bit tighter. There was one point, because we were on stacked bunks, and I was in one bunk where you could slide into it, but you couldn't turn over.
It was so narrow, the top to bottom.
Yeah,
oh, wow.
right.
And what did you do all day on the boat? Just were you up on the deck, or what were you doing?
Yeah, we go up on the deck for PT every day. And then we had gear in the hold, and so we were on guard duty. Like, who's going to steal it? But we had guard duty at night and PT during the day, and long, long chow lines. I got a book, The Brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky's. You know, the thing is about that thick. I read the whole thing. By the way, it's a really good book. It's a murder mystery, and
so the whole time to leave when you left San Diego, is that where you came up? You went out of San Diego to get to Vietnam. How long was all the boat trip combined? Was it?
Well, then we took a boat from Okinawa to Vietnam, so probably a month, I think. Because I had a week of mess duty in Okinawa. You know, I was the low-ranking guy. and they had a mess hall, and now it's all contractors, but then it was us. And so, yeah, it was about a month.
Your dealings with leadership when you were at your camp over there in Vietnam, what was that like?
We had, like I said, we all went over together.
Yeah.
And we knew each other, we relied each other, we trusted each other. We had solid leadership, I think.
That was a good experience, that part.
The gunnery sergeant we had, Gunny Vander Linden, we just called him Gunny Van, was on Iwo Jima with the Marines. He was at the Chosin Reservoir in Korea with the Marines, and he was my gunny in Vietnam. This guy had been everywhere. He was a salty old guy. He's good. He was a good gunny.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Okay, now let's go to honor flight.
Oh.
Tell me about that. What is that, if for somebody who doesn't know what that is, and tell me your experience on that.
Well, the honor flight is I knew about it. It was, they take a bunch of veterans to to D.C., and they treat them very well. I knew about that. And one time my brother in Illinois, he's an attorney. He's okay. He said his barber had just come back from honor flight. And he said, Ed, we got to do this. I said, I don't think so, Tom. He said, no, you and I, we'll do it together. Okay. So we signed up for Chicago honor flight, and we each signed up for Ogden honor flight. And then the following year, and so it's a long wait. It's a couple of years anyway.
Yeah.
The following year, my brother passed away. And I said, well, the heck with this, And I was hiking up my trail. So I'm too cheap to join a gym, but there's this 2,000-foot climb east of Ogden that I do a couple times a week. And I was hiking, and my Bluetooth rang, and it was people from the honor flight. And they said, we've had a cancellation. I wasn't up yet. My time wasn't up yet. I said, but we've had a cancellation, and we know if you could take this guy's place. I said, okay, yeah, I will. I'll do that. So my son, Brian, who lives in Ogden, he was in Arizona Air Guard. So he was my guardian. You have a buddy to go with you. I said, well, let's call him a buddy. No, he's a guardian. I said, really? So he did all the back stuff that was a surprise. And we went on a flight, and we were acknowledged everywhere we went, which just didn't happen before. And it's 60 years from Vietnam, and it felt great just to be acknowledged, just to be honored. I wear my hat, and people say, thanks for your service, but that was different. This was the whole of us being honored by the whole of them. It was a very good experience, and I would recommend it. I do recommend it to anybody who I know is qualified for it.
And you have contact with some vets, and once a month or something you're hanging out with them?
Yeah, once a month we go down, we have breakfast, and we don't tell war stories. We just tell stories, and the fishing, they get out pictures of the fish they caught, or the elk they nabbed, or the grandkids pictures. We're just a bunch of old grandparents.
Your takeaway from your experience over in Vietnam. Where are you at now on that?
It was good and bad. I will go to my grave regretting that I took people's lives. That will never be okay. But I'm also very proud. I was a Marine. I was a good Marine. I was very good at what I did. And so you can't take that away either. It's very conflicted. But I'm okay with it. I think both of those are appropriate. I think it's appropriate to be bad about taking people's lives, and it's appropriate to be proud of your service. It's a strange place to be, but that's where I am.
So It's a weird position to put people in. Like you said, the people whose kids don't go to war,
Yeah.
putting people in that position and not paying a price for it in a way, you know?
Yeah. It's, we need to find a better way to solve international problems. And we're not doing a very good job at that now. And I thought when the Iraq War came up, I thought, oh no, what are we doing? We can't, not over again. We can't do this again. And we did it again.
Yeah.
And Afghanistan, I thought Afghanistan was appropriate. I thought that was entirely appropriate, but we just didn't finish the job. We didn't finish the job, and we could have. We got distracted in a stupid, inappropriate, irresponsible way. We got distracted, and that turned out to be just a god-awful disaster.
Feels like there's no adults running things anymore. That's what it seems like to me. Maybe that's not.
Yeah.
Maybe that's too simplistic. I don't know.
I think it's too simplistic. I think we have disconnected adults who find themselves in a position of power. And the old cliche, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we're into that right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Well,
I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I've been offered this sort of thing, and I've turned it down. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. But I think I want to. My story is we shouldn't do this. I did it, and I did it well, and I wish I hadn't. But there's got to be a better way to solve international disputes, and I think we ought to bribe them. We just ought to pay off our enemies. We have the money.
Yeah.
Leave the kids alone.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Appreciate it.